All right, guys, I'm going to bring it back in here. We've overheard some great conversations. As I've said before, I'll say again, I'm an eavesdropper by nature. So thank you for sharing, being vulnerable and open with each other. I hope that you will be praying for one another this week. Obviously, a study of God's Word we're about to do, that's important. But if that's the only thing that we do when we get together as a church, and the only thing that unifies us is studying the Word of God, then we're not doing what God intended the church to do to its fullest. So appreciate you guys being vulnerable with one another as always. Back in the book of Esther. We're going to be in Esther 5 and 6 today, obviously starting in chapter 5. Our series is called For Such a Time as This, inspired by Esther chapter 4, which we talked about last week. This idea of that the book of Esther is, in one sense, about Esther, as in it's got her name on it. You know, she is the primary character that we follow throughout the course of this. It is definitely the most pivotal human character. However, what Esther and Mordecai and others will point us to throughout the story is that this is really a story about God and about how God works in the lives of his people to accomplish something really spectacular. And we get to see how his timing is perfect down to the seconds. It's perfect because Esther became queen for such a time as this. So as we continue to go through this series, we're doing one theme a week. Our past several weeks, we did, our first week was the God of Evil Systems, looking at how God could use such a corrupt system to put Esther into a position that she needed to be in order for him to accomplish his work. The next week, we looked at God and evil people, the God of evil people, looking at the character of Haman, who we'll be looking back at again this week in a little bit more depth, but how God could use someone as heinous as Haman to accomplish his good work for the sake of his people. And then last week, I knew I should have written these down. Last week, we looked at Esther, chapter 4, and our theme was leaving the palace to save the people. Thank you, Robin, for the bailout.
Yeah, I'd let that sit for a long time.
Yeah, we could have just left that one out there all day and just not move forward at all. But Robin's statements. Thank you.
It kind of seemed like you were passing notes.
I was.
That's what it was.
Certainly. I
guess that's the teacher in me.
Yes, that's good.
And it was.
Thank you for the abounding and never-ending grace of the church with an overconfident master. And so this week, we will be looking at the theme of how God humbles the exalted and exalts the humble. So we'll go ahead and read our passage again. For this series, and really this series only, we're going to be doing all of our scriptures in the New Living Translation because we're just handling so much text at once. It's helpful to have something that's written to be more readable in its translational style. Normally, for our more Bible study focused approach to preaching and teaching, I like to use the ESV, but the NLT will serve our purposes really well while we're in this. So if it looks a little bit different than what you're used to, that's why. So now let's go ahead and jump in, and we'll read straight through all of Esther chapter 5 and 6, and we'll go back through and we'll break down some of these things. On the third day of the fast, Esther put on her royal robes and entered the inner court of the palace just across from the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne facing the entrance. This is a great way to start out, to be like last time on Esther. She had just asked everyone to be praying and fasting for her for 3 days as she prepared to go see the king, because if the king does not extend his scepter to her when she enters unannounced, she'll be put to death. So that's what's been riding on this moment. Verse 2, when he, meaning King Xerxes, saw Queen Esther standing there in the inner court, he welcomed her and held out the gold scepter to her. Group exhale. So Esther approached and touched the end of the scepter. Then the king asked her, "What do you want, Queen Esther? What is your request? I will give it to you, even if it is half the kingdom." And Esther replied, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for the king." The king turned to his attendants and said, "Tell Haman to come quickly to a banquet, as Esther has requested." So the king and Haman went to Esther's banquet. While they were drinking wine, the king said to Esther, "Now, tell me what you really want. What is your request? I will give it to you, even if it is half the kingdom." Esther replied, "This is my request and my deepest wish. If I found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request and deepest wish, this is my request and deepest wish. If I found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request and do what I ask, please come with Haman tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for you. Then I will explain what this is all about." Haman was a happy man as he left the banquet. But when he saw Mordecai sitting at the palace gate, not standing up or trembling nervously before him, Haman became furious. However, he restrained himself and went on home. Then Haman gathered together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, and boasted to them about his great wealth and his many children. He bragged about the honors the king had given him and how he had been promoted over all the other nobles and officials. Then Haman added, "That's not all. Queen Esther invited me and the king himself to the banquet she prepared for us, and she has invited me to dine with her and the king again tomorrow." Then he added, "This is all worth nothing as long as I see Mordecai the Jew just sitting there at the palace gate." So Haman's wife Zeresh and all his friends suggested, "Set up a sharpened pole that stands 75 feet tall, and in the morning ask the king to impale Mordecai on it. When this is done, you can go on your merry way to the banquet with the king." This pleased Haman, and he ordered the pole set up. Chapter 6. That night, the king had trouble sleeping. So he ordered an attendant to bring the book of the history of his reign so it could be read to him. In those records, he discovered an account of how Mordecai had exposed the plot of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the eunuchs who had guarded the door of the king's private quarters. They had plotted to assassinate King Xerxes. "What reward or recognition did we ever give Mordecai for this?" the king asked. His attendants replied, "Nothing has been done for him." "Who's that in the outer court?" the king inquired. As it happened, Haman had just arrived in the outer court of the palace to ask the king to impale Mordecai on the pole he had prepared. So the attendants replied to the king, "Haman is out in the court." "Bring him in," the king ordered. So Haman came in, and the king said, "What should I do to honor a man who truly pleases me?" Haman thought to himself, "Well, whom would the king wish to honor more than me?" So he replied, "Well, if the king wishes to honor someone, he should bring out one of the king's own royal robes, as well as a horse that the king himself has ridden, one with a royal emblem on its head. Let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials, and let him see that the man whom the king wishes to honor is dressed in the king's robes and led through the city square on the king's horse. Have the officials shout as they go, 'This is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor.'" "Excellent," said the king to Haman. "Quick, take the robes and my horse and do just as you have said for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the gate of the palace. Leave out nothing you have suggested." So Haman took the robes and put them on Mordecai, placed him on the king's own horse, and led him through the city square, shouting, "This is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor." Awards sorry for the editorialization. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the palace gate, but Haman hurried home, dejected and completely humiliated. When Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends what had happened, his wise advisors and his wife said, "Since Mordecai, this man who has humiliated you as of Jewish birth, you will never succeed in your plans against him. It will be fatal to continue opposing him." While they were still talking, the king's eunuchs arrived and quickly took Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared. All right, a lot happened there. Can you say "egg on your face"? It's the name of the king before Haman.
it's gonna be biblical.
Racist. Okay. So a very natural question to have after reading this passage, especially in the opening portion here, the first few verses. A very natural question is, why didn't Esther ask the king her question? One, in the courtroom, when she went to go see him the first time, and two, at the first meal. She puts it off to this second meal. I wanted to open this up to you guys for a room question. What are your brainstorm thoughts of why she may not have brought it up in the courtroom and even at the first meal?
Because she knows she needs to feed him. I mean, that's how you get to any man.
That's fair enough.
He'd be in a better mood.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe there's too many people in the courthouse that heard about the law and all that. She thought they'd have better luck privately.
Yep, absolutely.
But
Great
then
thoughts.
privately, maybe she just got a chicken.
Yeah.
And this time he's had enough wine where you say yes.
We've also seen a history of Xerxes being a little more open to suggestion when he's been drinking heavily. Back in Esther 1.
Hard to
Yeah, absolutely.
She also hasn't seen him in over 30 days.
That's
and
true.
So she might need to be like testing the waters
Mhm.
to see how he's feeling about her. Cause she even says like, if I've pleased you, please come do this for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, all great thoughts. Anything else to add to that?
She can't put Xerxes in a defensive position.
Mhm.
That's why she can't ask in the middle of the court. She asks in the middle of the court, she's saying, hey Xerxes, for my sake, will you defy the law of the Medes and the Persians?
Yeah.
Then she gets to the banquet and she's like, oh, you brought Haman. Oh, this is a new wrinkle I hadn't thought about.
Didn't
Well, she
invite
invites
him?
She invited
Yeah, she invited him.
Yeah, she's the one who requested.
I've never figured out why.
So she
Actually,
can.
certainly.
That's
Because he-
exactly.
Right,
She's
because he's
she's
the
a
one that
conniving
has ordered it.
Right.
So she wants to ask him while he's there
Yeah.
They sure
in
do.
front of the
You
king.
could have just said she's a woman.
Basically saying it's grooming.
Sure.
Take your
Sure.
pick. I'm pretty.
And so what I find interesting is all of you guys, I mean, all of your answers I think have a lot of validity to it. You guys are not alone in those thoughts. In my research this week, the majority of what you guys said falls under that umbrella of one, I mean, even right down to the very practical side of like there's a wine and dine element to this, right? Like where we do want him to be well fed and in a good mood and have a good favor towards her and all of those things because she's about to make a tremendously big ask. So yes, not in the courtroom is the much easier one for us to answer. Why not? There's too many people in there you are asking him not only to defy the law, but also to kind of fall on his pride and to say, well, hey, it's my stamp on that law. This isn't even one of those laws of the Medes and the Persians from several emperors ago. This one's mine, you know? And so there's just a lot of pressure. There's a diplomatic approach to getting him out of the court setting. Then you have this question of, okay, so why doesn't she ask at the end of that meal? Is it just she's sensing maybe I don't have enough favor there? Because even Xerxes is not surprised that they go to a second venue because you can hear him ask. He says, okay, so what'd you really want to ask, you know, when they're in there? And so there's my first thought, and this might just be influenced by VeggieTales and my first introduction to Esther being with an asparagus playing the part. But maybe she's a green onion, I don't know. But there's a lot of hair covering up the inside. But-
To all the lost
Right.
brothers.
Yes, it's adorable. But my first thought was she chickened out. I thought she just got cold feet. And so she's like, I need 24 hours to get my will steeled back up because I can't handle it. I don't think that that's the case. That was what I thought when I was reading it. However, one, in doing a little bit more study, spending some more time with it, and even just reading the passage over and over again, she seems incredibly in control the whole time. It does not seem like someone who balks at the last second and changes her mind. This seems like a measured approach to all of this. That first meal, she would have had to prepare ahead of time before she went to go ask the king to come that night. That doesn't happen in a minute. Especially back then, they didn't have microwaves and air fryers, so you got to really, slow work things. And for the meal the next day, those preparations would have already been underway when she asked this. More than likely. So there's some premeditation here that this is how I'm going to do it. And so it's probably not fear, but what did she ask everyone to do for her? Pray
God.
and fast. So she's going into this with a
Almost like she knew
tremendous.
what God was up to. Huh?
She knew what God was up to for such a time as this, right? This whole theme of Esther is God's timing happening. And so she gets it down, I'm not exaggerating, to the minute, to the second that God intends for it to happen. And so this first meal puts Haman in a great position to, depending on what translation you read, quite literally hang himself. It's not hanging, it is a sharpened stick, but we'll get into more of that in a second. But I think this falls more into a category of discernment, wisdom, diplomacy, timing, relationship, all of those things, more so than the whims of a person in a highly stressful situation. I think there's a lot more measured approach that's happening here, and that's reasonable to see. Now, I wanted us to address that. I wanted to talk about that, and that's really what's here in the first 8 verses or so of our passage. And as important of a scene as it is to kind of put a cap on last chapter, really the bulk of our text today is not about Esther, it's about Haman, right? That's really what we see. It's the story of Haman being at his highest high and brought down to what's for only a couple of chapters his lowest low, and Mordecai having the contrasting position of going from a lowly position to a high position. And so I want us to focus in, again, that theme that we have of that God humbles the exalted and exalts the humble. If that sounds stolen, it's because it is from Luke 14:11. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled. For those who humble themselves will be exalted. That comes at the end of a parable that Jesus tells about picking the right seat at the feast, that it's always better to come in humbly because then God will raise you up. There are bunnies that are like fighting outside us. Springtime distractions. So I'm a little scattered, I guess. But this is the reminder, and it's a thread that we can pull from Genesis all the way through Revelation in the Bible. That this idea that God opposes the proud, meaning he humbles them, but that he elevates the humble. So we're going to do a bit of a dive into that. First, we're going to look at how that presents itself in our passage today. So start with me down in chapter 5, verse 9. We're just going to kind of look at a few of these plot points again that illustrate Haman's tremendous arrogance, his massive pridefulness. He is invited into this incredibly exclusive, prestigious honor to go and be seated with what are, other than him, the 2 most powerful people in the nation, or in the empire, at this point. Which means in the known world, it goes Xerxes, maybe Haman, then Esther, maybe Esther, then Haman, I guess depending on the structure of the day. But these are now the 3 most important people in the world, and Haman's there. And so he is obviously leaves that walking on cloud 9. I do like the simplicity of the NLT in the way that it says, Haman was a happy man when he left the banquet. There's something just, I don't know, almost cute about that. That Haman was a happy man as he left the banquet. And so he is, he's boasting, he's really yucking it up to his buddies, right? And I want to look at what types of things that he says here. So I like that he gathers everyone together first, that he's got to get his wife and his homies together so that he can boast to them about his great wealth and his many children. Obviously, I don't know if we're going to get it to work today.
Okay.
Our tablet's falling apart over here. But he boasts of his great wealth and his many children. He bragged about the honors that the king had given him, having promoted. So far we're talking wealth, We're talking family, which is important for legacy and prosperity and all of those things as well. Then we're talking about position and prestige and influence. And then the exclusivity of getting to be involved in a very high honor there. So he is the most honored. And he's just really telling everyone, I'm the best. And so all of that arrogance sets him up for this perfect sitcom moment where when he walks in very high on his own supply of saying, I'm coming in to go ask the king to sign off on me killing my enemy publicly on a 75-foot tall pole, by the way. Josh and I were working earlier this week. Josh was looking up some types of landmarks or whatnot that would kind of put it in perspective. I mean, it may not be a universal measurement, but what Josh had found for me was a lighthouse. I mean, if you've ever been to a lighthouse, very tall.
Water tower.
Water tower, 75 feet tall.
It would have put Mordecai up so high that you'd have struggled to know who it was up there.
But I'm sure Haman would have found a way to make sure everyone. And so it really sets up Haman for this moment of who would the king wish to honor more than me? Because I'm the best. So who could deserve more honor? Literally no one. Look at all the honor I've had.
Talk about not being able to read the room.
Yes. It's just an absolute classic moment.
fail.
Absolutely. When pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with the humble is wisdom. Has there ever been a verse written better for someone than Proverbs 11:2 for Haman? We see this verse played out in real time for Haman as he is thoroughly disgraced. And the best part is unintentionally. There's not even, it's not even that Xerxes is trying to put him in his place. He's just saying, hey, you're my man. I need to honor this guy. Who can honor him better than you? You know, I'm busy that day, but hey, would you go walk out in the blistering heat to go do that? And so he is well and truly disgraced. And the worst part is his entire crew knew exactly who Mordecai was, exactly who was parading around, exactly who this freshly built stick in the ground was for. So he has to go back home to utter embarrassment from the people who he just brought in and was boasting to. So it's a very thorough undoing of him. Now, throughout Psalms and Proverbs in particular, but throughout the whole of Scripture, particularly those two, there are dozens of these references to pride being evil and humility being good. Obviously, we take that almost for granted that the Bible says it is bad to be proud and it is good to be humble. What I want you guys to discuss at your table is why. Why is God so adamantly against pride, and why is pride sinful? This is not a trick question. Pride is sinful. Don't think I'm trying to catch you with one of those classic Jonathan moves. It is sinful. But I want you guys to discuss at your tables what about pride is so evil in the eyes of God. Spend some time at your tables discussing. All right, guys. I need to rein us back in here.
Bad pun.
Okay. Huh?
You said rain
Oh.
because we need to move on. It was like bad pun.
All right, I'll start over at this table over here. Listen, what did you guys talk about?
We talked about that God's the only one worthy of worship and glory and all the things. And so pride gets in the way of him getting what he deserves, but also pride always leads to hurt. So he's protecting his glory, but also protecting his people, because pride either hurts yourself or others or both.
Very good. Well said. Good job, guys. Now, over here, Barbara, what did you guys talk about?
It's hard to sum it up and just say his definition,
Yeah.
having a misunderstanding of your importance compared to God's.
Absolutely.
And if you misunderstand that, you think, you've got it all.
Yeah. Absolutely, and
So you
saying,
don't need to listen.
exactly, and I don't need you for this, I don't need you for that, I'm not gonna listen to you, I was a teenager before, like, I've made my parents feel like that.
That's it, that's
I know,
right.
yeah, so it's this idea of, I'm gonna do it my way, and then you say, okay, with what money, what car, what house you gonna live in, all that stuff, and you're like, whoa, I thought that was included, and so absolutely, I think you guys nailed it, absolutely nailed.
I have
Why is
one
it this
quick question.
fire?
We have all this surrounding one thing, right? The edict to kill the Jews in 11 months.
Mhm.
What does he say to Haman? Mordecai the Jew.
Mhm.
He didn't know it was Jews that he signed off on. It was that group of people. When he
Yeah.
signed.
Haman only told him there was
Yeah,
a
but
race
see,
of
that-
people in the land.
That puts Haman in a position though, to have to do
Claim.
something completely against what he believes. And I think that also set him up for the next banquet.
Yeah,
So what you were
that's a good
saying
answer.
before is the timing,
really
is
set
it
him up.
wouldn't have been
Yeah.
as good. If she'd asked that first banquet.
Right.
So God already knew that and he put on her heart to do the two.
yes.
And she probably didn't know what was gonna happen
Oh,
unless she
no,
put that
no.
book out there and said, hey,
Sure.
you wanna read this, honey? Why
Right.
you can't sleep tonight?
Right, no, we'll do a revisit of this next week, but there's too many coincidences
Oh, yeah.
to ignore the hand of God and all this and the timing and all of that.
Esther's an inside job.
It's an inside job, that's right, very inside. So, you guys handled that well. We want to look at the counterpoint here, which is Mordecai, right? So Mordecai, it's not that he was the lowest of the low by any means. Doesn't seem to be impoverished. He works as part of the guard of the gate. So he has a position and all of that. However, he's been made very low by Haman's proclamation. Just finished up a stint of public mourning and humbling himself, humiliation in the eyes of those around him. And now, it just so happens, Xerxes can't sleep. What's better to make you sleep than reading the world's most boring book? And so everything that's ever happened, open it up to page 15. That's what we have here, so Xerxes can go back to sleep. He does not fall back asleep. In fact, he realizes that they slighted someone. Mordecai ends up embodying a verse that we'll look at in a little bit. Remember, I said we were going to come back to it, so we are coming back to it. Esther chapter 2, we glossed over the Mordecai saving Xerxes. This is that scene again that they're referring to, that Xerxes reads about in his book. One day as Mordecai was on duty at the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthana and Teresh, who were guards at the door of the king's private quarters, became angry at King Xerxes and plotted to assassinate him. But Mordecai heard about the plot, gave the information to Queen Esther, and then she went and told the king about it and gave Mordecai credit for the report. When an investigation was made and Mordecai's story was found to be true, the two men were impaled on a sharpened pole. Doesn't that sound familiar? This was all recorded in the book of the history of King Xerxes, which he opens up for bedtime stories. So, this is exactly what Mordecai did to save the king, and he received nothing for that. Although he should have been honored right here in chapter 2, but that wouldn't have been in line with God's timing. And what we see in 1 Peter 5:6 is that when you humble yourselves, therefore under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you. Mordecai could have gone and whispered in Esther's ear, hey, I think Xerxes forgot to do a little something for me. Feels like I should have gotten something for literally saving the emperor's life. But he doesn't. Because at the proper time, God exalts him. God is the one who lifts him up via Xerxes, via Haman. Now, it's all about God's timing over ours, God's justice over ours. Life may feel unfair sometimes. Fair is not a promise that God makes to us. Just is the promise that he makes in due timing. So, it's in this time, and this timing, like Robin was just saying, raises raises Mordecai's stock with King Xerxes. It also, in Haman's eyes, lowers his own stock with the king. And it sets the board for Esther's coming request. The stage is set, which will lead to Haman's downfall.
Side note, the Esther that's showing, or has been showing for a couple of years at Sight and Sound Theater, they play it off the same, I'm chicken, so I'm gonna wait till another day.
Yeah.
Too. It's the first I've ever heard of this. Could be God had already told Esther's second time. That's my timing.
Yeah, I just think there's too much pointing to the fact that Esther is in control of herself, for it to just be a fear thing. Although that's how I went into it this week. I feel more confident now. So we've established that Haman is prideful. We've seen how God humiliates him. But there's one moment in particular that we ought to focus in on to learn more about who Haman is, and I think learn more about who we are too. So it's in chapter 5, go back to verse 13. This is right after he's been bragging to his people, and then he drops this line. But this is all worth, hey, there we go. But this is all worth nothing, as long as I see Mordecai the Jew just sitting at the palace gate. This is all worth nothing. He has everything. There's only one guy he could possibly be jealous of, and it'd be Xerxes. He is the next most powerful dude, and it's all worth nothing if one Jew won't bow to me when I walk by. That's it, period. Even though I'm going to kill them all. It's already on the calendar. It's all worth nothing. Yes, Michael.
Maybe. I don't want to take anything away from what you just said. Yeah, it's all worth nothing because I can't get the one Jew to bow to me. But what the one Jew has is he just sits there at the gate at peace.
Yeah.
That's shalom.
Yeah.
That's my God in heaven is good, and your problems are less than that.
Yeah.
And that has got to drive Haman crazy.
Yeah.
Because there's a blood-soaked trail through the citadel of his rise to power. And he has everything that he can think of, except peace.
What I want to ask you guys at your tables to discuss, from this verse 13, after he said everything he has, but he says he has nothing, what do we learn about Haman and his priorities from this comment in verse 13? Discuss at your tables, what do we learn about Haman and his priorities from his comment in verse 13? Well, I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes to discuss, but what do we learn about Haman and about his priorities from this comment in verse 13?
Let Mordecai
I
control.
draw a tree.
He sees
And sees himself
deeply insecure.
as divine.
Himself.
His rule is
Yeah, when
divine.
you-
His
when you
wisdom
have- when
divine.
you
His
Project
authority
onto somebody
divine.
else.
And so
That
it's
because
not
of this
a
person
mere
right now,
disagreement. It's
You've
a blasphemy
basically given him
against
control over your
when
life.
Mordecai
And that's what's
says,
frustrating.
"I'm your God and not you."
Is he realizes he doesn't even
I
have
want to go kind of off what like you just said before, like
because of Mordecai.
you kind of see how
Because
he
of the
like,
way
doesn't
he
have
feels.
peace because
Just one
of
more
like all the
minute.
verses before it. It's like
Yeah,
it starts off as
obviously
like he was
priorities.
joyful leader thing, and he's like talking about how he was like the highest and all.
Yeah.
And he gets to this, and it's just like, man, all this will be nothing because of this guy. It's like,
obviously got his
he
own-
literally
he's
knows
obviously
like,
got
you know,
his
like,
own-
almost will be like, okay, now I just gotta get rid of this guy. It's like it's not the same.
It
It's
doesn't
not-
know his
it's-
rights.
And he's already got, he's got the warrant sealed inside.
Yes.
It's never enough.
You can, I don't know. It's
There's
like
no amount of blood
How, what
he
did you
would
brag about?
shed
About as well.
to give him peace.
I think the grammar just there kind of really
No,
shows how this
it's,
unsettled or uneasy he was because that one thing.
Position and family.
Position, yeah. Because wealth is
No
up
news
there.
seen after his son,
He's
I would cut back on
He's
like
got everything.
another soul.
Mordecai
Nope.
shouldn't have
Late-
anything
late
to
Saul.
control him
Yeah.
with, but it's
Yeah.
because of how he sees and how he perceives Mordecai.
And
That has,
Gideon before,
in his mind,
Samson before
without-
Saul, and Gideon
because
before
of that,
Samson,
he has
No
not.
news in.
and
He knows
Adonai
that.
before
seemed to have a loyal wife, but he didn't brag about her or his daughters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Gonna bring it back.
Racist, and
Sorry, I keep interrupting Rob.
Racist and-
It's not on
Other
purpose,
times.
I promise.
he's racist and feminist.
Yeah.
Which just
Second.
doesn't look like
Second.
sexist,
The
yes,
opposite
not
of
opposite of
feminist.
feminist,
Anti-feminist.
racist and.
Okay, so we'll start at Barbara's table this time since I started with Alyssa last time. I'll start at Alyssa's table this time since Barbara just.
Did Barbara just punt? Is that what happened?
How we can do that? Barbara can. I don't know if anyone else can. Alyssa, go ahead. Go ahead.
Write that down, write that down.
So we talked about how all of it is summed up in like idolatry, and that he really almost sees himself as godlike, and so it would be blasphemy for Mordecai to not honor him because he sees himself as so high and so valuable that it just rocks his whole world that everyone else doesn't see him that way too. And then going back to the piece that he's striving for something that he will never find in the places that he's looking. So he's searching. He needs something, but he'll never find it.
Very good. Barbara, are you ready? I'm just giving you a hard time. Just giving you a hard time.
I think I'd kind of sum it up as he was all centered on self as opposed to others and God.
Yeah. It's right there in my notes.
Oh,
What they said, not what you said. You guys, this is why we do questions, by the way. It's for moments like this where it's like, I knew I didn't have to teach that, you know? It's a part of it. That's wonderful. Absolutely. The person who views himself too highly ties really well into our definition of pride, having a misunderstanding of who you are in relation to who God is. He absolutely views himself too highly. When you view yourself as a god, the world revolves around you, right? We've got an illustration for this one. Could I get a couple of volunteers? Jasper, you want to be one of our volunteers? Okay, punch you, Mike. Evie, you want to be one of our volunteers? This is perfect. Okay. Come on up. You want the big one or the little one?
Big one.
Yeah, I knew it. Here you go. You want to be this one? That's fine. You can stay still. Okay. Face forward so everyone can see. Okay, guys. So we're representing 3 different planetary type bodies, celestial bodies. Evie is the sun, because she's got the big one. Jasper is the earth, because he's got the medium one. And I'm the moon, because I'm the smallest. And so,
of course.
when you are represented by Mr. Earth Jasper here. So, would you take a step forward for us right here so I have a little room to operate? When you're prideful, you think everything revolves around you. And everything should revolve around you because you're the center of everything. And look, yeah, everything should go around. However, what you forgot is there's something a lot bigger than that. Evie, would you move up a little bit so we can move around you? Because we actually revolve around God. And I guess to make this perfectly accurate, I'm supposed to go around Jasper when he's going on this. I don't think I can pull that off.
Yeah,
That's
you
all.
don't really have to.
So
And the orbits aren't elliptical either. It's just really bothering.
that's true. You know what? Next time I'll have you bring your strongest set. But when we're talking about pride, it's saying everything should revolve around me. When we're talking about humility, it's considering others. Most importantly, God. Everything revolves around Him. Give a hand to our wonderful volunteers. Thank you, guys. Thank you. This is also why we like to have our kids in here too, because then you get extra cute volunteers. So that is Haman's problem. He views himself as God, and that things should revolve around him. What do gods need more than anything? What do they demand? They demand to be worshipped. They demand to be respected. And so when Haman walks by Mordecai, and he sees someone disrespecting him, it bothers him. Yes, we could go into the thing about peace that Michael said as well, but when you just leave it at face value, it bothers him when Mordecai does not bow to him and does not pay him the respect he thinks he's due. What this tells us about Haman and about anybody who views respect as the ultimate, highest, most important thing that someone could show you in life is that you have some sort of an improper view of your personal value. Some kind of an issue with your personal value. It's either too low or it's too high if everything's revolving around you, right? There's this great story from Daniel chapter 4. We won't read it all because of time right now, but in Daniel chapter 4, it's King Nebuchadnezzar of the Babylonians. And he has this dream that really freaks him out, so he asks Daniel to come in and tell him what the dream means. And Daniel says, essentially, it means that God's about to humble you because you've gotten too proud. He's going to turn you into a beast, not physically, but mentally. And you're going to run around for 7 years acting like a cow, eating grass, being insane out of your mind. And Nebuchadnezzar's like, oh, okay. And then a year later, it happens. And so I'm going to kind of thumb through this real quick so I can get to the part for you. 7 years. He ate grass like a cow, was drenched with the dew of heaven. He lived this way until his hair was as long as eagle's feathers and his nails were like bird's claws. But after this time had passed, we see a contrast, because what he had said up here that I skipped over is verse 30 here. So Nebuchadnezzar looked out across the city and said, look at this great city of Babylon. By my own mighty power, I have built this city as my royal residence to display majesty and splendor. And while the words were still in his mouth, a voice called out from heaven, O King Nebuchadnezzar's message is for you. You are no longer the ruler of this kingdom. Now, after he's been humbled, how does he speak about God? After this time had passed, I, Nebuchadnezzar, looked up to heaven. My sanity returned, and I praised and worshipped the Most High and honored the one who lives forever. His rule is everlasting, and his kingdom is eternal, and all the people of the earth are nothing compared to him. He does as he pleases among the angels of heaven and among the people of the earth. No one can stop him or say to him, what do you mean by doing these things? When my sanity returned to me, so did my honor and glory in my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out. I was restored as the head of my kingdom, and with even greater honor than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and glorify and honor the King of heaven. All his acts are just and true, and he is able to humble the proud. Nebuchadnezzar had power similar to Xerxes, much more than Haman, much more than us. And what's most important to him before he's humbled, look at all this stuff that I've done. Me. But then after, it's all about God. It goes from being internally focused to externally focused at God. God's greatest commandments to us is to love God and to love others. This is about giving, not receiving. It's about sacrifice and not selfishness. Jesus is the ultimate example of this, which we see painted beautifully in this passage. I couldn't cut any of it. It was too good. We'll be done in 5 minutes. And the kids can come out. Philippians 2, 1 through 11. Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ, any comfort from his love, any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate? All of that is Paul's way of saying, are you internally changed by Christ? Verse 2. Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, working together with one-minded purpose. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. Thinking of others is better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. That's Paul's way of saying, if you're internally changed by Christ, then live that out externally. That should look the same on the outside as you've been changed on the inside. Verse 5. You must have the same attitude that Jesus Christ had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave. He was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God. And he died a criminal's death on the cross. Therefore, God elevated him to the place of highest honor and gave him the name above all other names, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue declare that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father.
Amen.
What a tremendous love we've been shown. If you can't take anything away from that passage, what a tremendous love we've been shown. If you're tired this week, if you're feeling broke down, beat down, you're afraid, you don't know what's coming, I can tell you one thing and one thing for sure. Jesus Christ loves you in a way that no one else ever will be able to fully replicate, no matter how hard we try, no matter what we sacrifice. Jesus, the Lord of the universe, the crowned prince of creation, died for us. He humbled himself. It says it right there. He came down. He didn't just come down to be a regular human. He came down to be poor. He came down to be homeless. He came down to make his name mud by hanging out with all of the people who were untouchables in society. That's the Jesus who loves you. That's the Jesus that Esther represents in her story. The one who has a role in elevating Mordecai, who's forgotten. If we don't understand and believe and feel and experience the sacrificial love of our Savior Jesus, then we will not be able to sacrificially love other people. You will not be humble when you can't grasp the humility that Christ had to take to die a traitor's death. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Oh, the thunder really helps with the backdrop here. I'm ending with this. In The Lion, the Witch, and the
Well, you
Wardrobe.
should.
Exactly, it's the best way to end. We follow a story of betrayal by young Edmund. And he's, from the moment he steps into Narnia, he gets in with the wrong crowd, right? You know, the witch has him basically under her spell with promises of, you'll have all the candy that you want.
Dad's young Turkish, don't lie.
That you'll have power over your siblings. That you'll be my son. You'll be a prince. These promises, if only you will bring your siblings together. Really, if you will betray your family. Because they will serve you, is what she says. So if you're willing to betray your family, I'll give you all these things.
You just got tired of being a middle child.
Exactly. And yet, when he returns to the witch, not having completed his task, he comes in, he doesn't have his siblings, but he says, I know where they're going. And he betrays them, and he betrays Aslan the lion, who he hasn't met yet, but he knows about, by saying, they're going to the stone table, you can intercept them on the way. She doesn't honor him. She enslaves him. And she beats him. And he's forced to do hard labor alongside her on this trek to the table. And when the witch realizes that she's not going to be able to get them before they get there, before they meet up with Aslan, and they're going to be untouchable, basically. They're not going to be able to get them. Okay, then I'm going to kill Edmund. Because there's a prophecy that says there has to be 4 humans on the throne. So I'm just going to kill Edmund. He's a traitor. And traitor's blood belongs to the witch. So she turns on him and prepares to kill him. And at the last moment, Aslan sends a rescue party. And they come in and they save Edmund. And Edmund gets brought back to Aslan's camp, and he is distraught. And the next morning, Aslan pulls Edmund aside and he says, in this private conversation with him, we don't know what the content is, but we know what happens afterwards. The witch comes as a kind of like it, she calls for a conversation And the witch addresses Aslan the lion, and she says these words, "You have a traitor there, Aslan," said the witch. Of course, everyone present knew that she meant Edmund. But Edmund had got past thinking about himself. He had got past thinking about himself after all he had been through, and after the talk he had had that morning with Aslan. He just went on looking at Aslan. It didn't seem to matter what the witch said. It makes me emotional to read that. That overnight, Edmund goes from traitor to son. And he can't stop looking at Aslan. It doesn't matter what the witch says anymore. He said, that's not who I am. I know she's talking about me, but that's not me anymore. And then Aslan goes to die the traitor's death. It's Aslan who dies in the place of Edmund, just like Jesus who dies in the place of us. We were the traitor. To live sacrificially, we need to experience the sacrificial love of Christ and be transformed. The end.